I will bring this meeting of the Thurston County Planning Commission to order. The Thurston County Planning Commission is a resident advisory committee of the Board of County Commissioners on land use planning matters, such as the comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments. Planning Commission actions are in the form of recommendations to the county commissioners, the final decision makers. All Planning Commission meetings are open to the public. Community members are welcome to observe all Planning Commission briefings and work sessions. So we could just take a look at the agenda. I'm gonna take a look, see if there's anything that needs to be added, and if there are none, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Alrighty. With the agenda approved, we'll move on to public communications. Do we know, are there folks planning to speak online? I don't see anyone here in the room. Doing introductions today.
Any hands raised?
Oh, before we do that, sorry, it's not in my little script. We might as well do introductions. Why don't you start, Commissioner Casino?
I'm Eric Casino. I live in the Lacey UGA and I serve the Planning Commission at large.
Kevin Pessinger, District 5.
Bill Fishburne, I live and serve in District 4. Scott Nelson, District 4. Colin Burlett, District 5.
Barry Halverson, Yelm, Washington, District 2.
Yvonne Miller, District 1.
And I am Daniel Baumbarger, Vice Chair of District 1, acting as chair today because Joel is out. All righty, now we can move to public communications. All right, I'll read the script just in case anyone online would like to speak here. The Thurston County Planning Commission welcomes comments from the public at all meetings. Please introduce yourself, including the address you reside in the county. Please address the Planning Commission, not the audience or staff. The Planning Commission may not respond to public comments. Speakers are limited to a total of 3 minutes. The timer will show on the video screens to help keep track of time. Meeting attendees cannot donate their speaking time to another person. No comments that are lewd and offensive, inflammatory, hateful, defamatory, or discriminatory in nature. No comments that are commercial in nature. All materials provided to the county may be subject to release pursuant to the Public Record Act, and remarks on projects that have already had a Planning Commission hearing will be forwarded to the Board of County Commissioners for their consideration. Thank you for your cooperation. If you are on Zoom, since we have no one here in the room, please use the raise your hand option to address the Planning Commission. You'll be promoted to a panelist where it's your turn to speak. 30 seconds or so.
I do want to note that Betsy Norton, who is online, did submit public comments that we have here. I just noticed that. I know that was sent relatively late, so.
Well, seeing no public comments, we will call public communications to a close. Next on the agenda is new business, and we have none. So we will continue, we'll move to continued business, which is work session number 2, the Black Lake Quarry Land Use Amendment and Rezone. I believe that is Claire who will be guiding us.
Yes. All right. Hi, everybody. Let me get the presentation up for us. And all right, can everyone see that okay?
We can.
Perfect. All right. So this is a follow-up from a topic from last time. This presentation is mostly going to be answering some questions and providing additional information that was requested last time. And then we'll have some time for discussion and see if we'd like to set a hearing date. So these are the main questions that we heard back on June 4th, the first time this topic was brought to the Planning Commission. Planning Commission was interested in taking a look at where our geodata says mapped wetlands are, taking a look at critical aquifer recharge areas and how they would affect possible uses on the site if it was rezoned. taking a consideration for soil types on the site as well. And there was a question about the rail line as well. And I want to preface this with, we had a site visit with a couple of commissioners yesterday and staff. We got to go out and actually see the site itself and get some information from the applicant as well. You should have in front of you, or at least passed along to you as a public comment, also additional information from the project applicant, just addressing questions from last time and a few things that came up in discussion at the site visit. So for that first question, we've got the wetlands map pulled up here. There's a couple things to note on here. The wetland area that's showing up in the middle of the site here, that is actually the former location of a constructed pond used to wash and process the material that's being mined on the site currently. As you can see in the aerial, this shape right here, that's a very light color, is actually the current location of that pond. This area is dry, and it was never a true wetland because it was man-made. The main wetland areas on the site are adjacent to the Black River. And actually, we did go out on site and stand down here in this bottom quadrant and see that buffer area. It is full natural foliage in there. And I believe that makes up something like 20 acres of the site. This is, I just wanted to provide additional drawings and context, and this also actually shows the line for the wetland boundary on the site. So this is from the most recently submitted 5-year mine review application. It has not been approved yet, so this is a submitted plan, but not actually the approved one. It is still actively under review, but you can see there's a green line down on the bottom here. North is up this way compared to that map that we just looked at that shows the wetland boundary along that west side of the site there. And this also shows the phases of the mining as well. So some of the phases down here have not yet been used up, and they're still planning to mine some of those areas. And this is just that same additional context. This actually also shows the possible phases for reclaiming the site once mining would be completed. And this has that same wetland delineation on it. To the question about critical aquifer recharge areas, this is what's shown on this map. As you can see, the whole site has some kind of critical aquifer recharge area on it. In this map, 1 and this dark purple shade are the most intense classification of critical aquifer recharge area. So because the site is really primarily sandy and gravelly, water infiltrates quite quickly here. So it's all pretty high priority as far as protection for that. And so all these dark purple areas do have some restrictions on activities that could be permitted. So these activities, if the site were rezoned, would be limited in their feasibility. And they include things like asphalt, cement, and concrete plants, chemical manufacturing or processing, and commercial or industrial uses that generate more than a certain amount of hazardous waste or materials per month, and wood or wood product preserving and treating. So those are all pretty chemically intense uses that have a higher risk for groundwater contamination. So they are not allowed in any of these dark purple areas that you see here. As far as soils on the site, they're primarily mapped as Everett and Alderwood series, gravelly or very gravelly sandy loam, which makes sense for a gravel mine. Obviously, the soil on the site is also very highly disturbed because it is being mined.
Claire, we have some
We have a
questions
question, yeah.
for a moment. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. On this map of the critical recharge areas, when we were out there at the location yesterday,
Mhm.
we asked about the sample wells where they take samples routine basis to check aquifer recharge locations. Do you know where those are located in this?
I don't, but we can research that for the hearing.
And I was just wondering how many, I can't remember how many of those that they have and how often they test them.
Mhm.
I do remember that it was pretty regularly.
Yeah, and I can make a note of that for the hearing.
Is that the only question in the room? Or no, Commissioner Bartley?
Yeah, I was just curious about, I mean, because of the dramatic nature of the changes in the landscape from the use of it, like, does that change the recharge potential for those areas? Does that get noted in there? I mean, because like, they're taking like 70 feet of gravel off of the top of it. It seems like it would have an effect on where it stands.
Hydrologically speaking, it would probably make it more easy for water to infiltrate and you'd get more quantity because you're not losing it to evapotranspiration from the vegetation.
That was my thought.
All right, was that it for questions in order? All right, Claire, you can continue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so just with the soils, yeah, as you guys have noted and can see, it is very disrupted, and that probably does change some of what we have, like as far as GIS maps go. And also the types of soils that the site is mapped for are soils that have some type of potential basically to support things like forestry or agriculture. That's something that I know folks had asked about last time as well. The site currently doesn't really contain any loggable forest, and in its current state, without remediation and regrading, wouldn't be able to support agriculture either, just given the slopes on the site, the artificial slopes on the site as a result of the mining. But technically, as mapped, the soil could support those activities, but the site isn't designated as far as our long range planning to support either forestry or agriculture. It has mineral designation on it, obviously as a mining site. That's it. And then for the rail question, this map is zoomed out much more than some of the other maps we've been looking at. This little blue square is the approximate location of the site. So the northern connection, that where this line turns black up here, this is where it's actually still active, and that's a BNSF. It's their Tacoma Rail Capital and Tidelands Division, and then it's closed and abandoned all the way through down past the Mima Mounds area to the southern connection, which is Puget Sound and Pacific Railroad. And on the site visit, we saw that this railroad is well and truly abandoned. It's got sections that are paved over it. It's extremely overgrown. It is definitely in a state of disuse and not currently functioning.
I would say it's not even, you can't even transit through it with the brush.
No, you couldn't even walk up and down that as it currently stands. Yeah. Yeah, and then I think we had talked to, there's been discussion about what the lifetime of the mine left is, and that information is in the written comment that was submitted. But we also had some conversations about it yesterday, and it does depend on the speed at which they mine. But at their current speed, it could be anywhere from 20 to 40 years or up, or possibly more, depending on how quickly they remove material from the site. But it does have the potential to function as a mine for quite some time.
The letter states 18 to 30 years, depending on how aggressive they
Oh.
might.
Mm-hmm.
They were discussing something more like 40 when we were there. Just
Yeah.
given their capacity.
The number in Toyer's letter is 9 million tons, and yesterday they were saying they had 12.8 million tons. So I don't know if that included all phases, but that difference is probably the difference of decades of material.
Yeah. And that difference might also be based on their desire to not mine below the water table, not do any dredging. They have material available that would have to be dredged on site, but they're not interested in mining that way.
Yeah, I think that's another important point to make, because they can go down 70 feet. They've determined geologically that they've got rock and gravel down that far, but they've made a determination to stop at the locations that they're currently at for a base level, about 40 feet less than what they could go down. Which would require, like you said, dredging, because basically the water would fill in the area that they're taking gravel out of, and they would be dredging the gravel out of the water in the mine area. But they've decided not to do that. I don't know if that's in their plan or not, Claire.
To do dredging.
Right.
It seems like they're not aiming for that. I think they're technically approved for it, but I don't think it's their desire to do it.
I thought they were technically approved for it, but they've determined that they're not going to do that. That may have.
Yeah,
all-
I don't think it's quite as economically feasible.
Right, okay.
If there's more presentation, please feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing left for in the actual presentation is if anybody is interested in revisiting any information from 6.4, I just kept it in all available here and to aid discussion. But otherwise, I'm ready to ask about setting a hearing if you guys are interested.
Thank you. I did review that since I wasn't here on 6.4. But is there any desire from folks here to re-review the material? Commissioner Messenger?
Thank you, Chair. Are we required to hold a public hearing?
I believe so.
Because
I mean-
the docs, because it was submitted or,
I think so.
thank you.
And I see from the agenda, Claire, that you are suggesting July 16th for a public hearing. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Commissioner Bartlett?
If we are interested in discussing this at all further, I would like to have that, the information on like what the criteria were for this kind of site that we had that neat little table.
Oh, yeah, I can, here.
This one? Yeah.
Commissioner Bartlett, is that the,
Yes, that's exactly the one.
Location criteria table.
I can. Is that locational criteria table up on the screen now for you guys?
it is not, I believe you are sharing. this-
Okay, I think I need to reshare here.
Question while we're waiting.
Does the allowed uses?
The site, I think the map shows at least a house and a maintenance building. Are those the only structures or do you see any other structures?
There's a lot of
It's up now. We saw temporary but not permanent structures.
big equipment.
Yeah, big equipment that was functionally like a processing center, but nothing that had a foundation.
Couple of banjo RVs.
I have a question. I am aware that there's not a res, but I was wondering if the local tribes have also been notified by chance to get.
I believe they'll be notified as part of the SEPA process, which will actually is coming up pretty soon here when we'll really start kicking that off. There's more chances for that kind of intergovernmental work under SEPA.
There's no further discussion. Is there interest here to motion to set a public hearing for July 16th, 2025?
So we're looking for its obligation too.
We have a motion from Commissioner Nelson. We have a second.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
So we did determine that we are required to have a hearing on this.
We think.
I would think so.
Regardless of whether we're obligated to, it has now been moved and seconded, but this is the time to discuss that. If we don't think it's necessary, we could push back on staff to prove it.
To approve our work plan?
No, that we have to have a hearing, I suppose.
I think it'd be good idea for the public.
I want to hear from the public.
Yeah, I have a feeling they're gonna have a lot to say about this.
I would agree. Commissioner Pessinger, is there a reason you would like to explain why you think we might not be obligated to do a hearing for this?
Yeah. The fact that the requirements for this type of rezone specifically state no impact to natural, to any environmental issues. And this spot has been clearly stated by staff as that not being remotely possible, that there's absolutely going to be environmental impacts no matter what might be done. Means to me, there's no opportunity for us to make this decision. It's rejected upon just the straight criteria that we have been already given to ourselves by state law. So
So if
I
I'm,
don't think we have the ability to make this decision, but if we need to hold a public hearing, that's great.
so if I'm understanding correctly, you're considering, or are you encouraging a no vote on setting a public hearing on the basis that you don't believe that the rezone is legally applicable?
No, I'm not recommending that because I just don't understand the criteria well enough,
Gotcha.
but I am concerned about it.
I share your concern. It does sound interesting that we're holding a hearing on a rezone that might not be legally allowed. Okay, any other discussion before we call a vote? This one I think is probably best if we call off folks. Do we have someone able to do that, or should I just do that myself?
I could call the roll.
If you could, please.
Commissioner Casino,
Aye.
Commissioner Pessinger,
Abstain.
Commissioner Fishburne. Commissioner Miller,
Abstain.
Commissioner Halverson.
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett,
Abstain.
Commissioner Nelson,
Aye.
Commissioner Baumgartner.
Aye.
Commissioners online? I didn't ask.
We don't have Joel or Kaiser.
Okay.
Sorry, just gonna record this.
No worries. That's a lightly staffed meeting today.
Okay. 5 yeses, 3 abstentions.
Motion carries.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't then, or because we need a 50
It's a
plus one,
majority of appointed.
not a
Yeah,
majority of
appointed.
present.
It's not a majority of the quorum.
That's the same thing.
Well, quorum is, it's based on current attendance, not how many people are elected. I think it would be based on how many total people are in attendance.
Well, let's get our rules of procedure.
Let's research.
It's based on how many people are appointed to planning commission.
Oh, so we would not have a majority.
We changed it years ago because we had several meetings where 3 planning commissioners made a decision
Oh,
based on the entire planning commission when we had 9.
Yeah, painful.
No action of the commission may be taken without the affirmative vote of a simple majority of the appointed members.
A simple majority of 10 would be 6.
Right.
All right, so the motion does not carry. Are we thinking to move this to next meeting's agenda to consider a motion?
I think we have to. I don't think we can consider the same thing twice in one meeting, can we?
Not in one legislative session, no.
No, we'll have to move agenda item 4 to next meeting.
Okay, we'll plan for that.
Of course, if the date of the public hearing is changed, that will be a different motion.
Thank
right.
you all for your discussion and consideration.
Thank you, Claire.
Mhm.
All right, moving on the agenda, we're on item number 5, which is work session 36, Thurston 2045, follow-up and recommendations. Says here the staff is Maya, Amelia, and Anna. I don't know if any of them are present. Yes. Perfect timing.
I am present. Is Amelia in the room? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Number 60.
Well, thank
Okay, I have the notes. So just let me know when you want me to get started.
Alrighty, and then we're just, I'm sorry, I apologize, I was not here last meeting and I did not see meeting notes, so I don't know how that went in. But sounds like we got through another 20,
Hopefully we'll get through the rest.
and we are using blocking concerns. Or, I'm sorry, no, we stopped doing thumbs last time here, I'm sorry, it's been a month since I've been in meetings. Refreshing how we're handling general opinion gathering on this. We're just doing a voice.
Yeah, we're
thumbs.
going for the thumbs.
Any opposed?
Yeah, sort of any opposed and then going on.
Right, because I remember the first time we did that, thumbs, people's hands got tired.
Yeah.
We switched to voice, and so I just wanted to make sure we were all operating off of the same agreement when we.
That's a reasonable thing.
Kind of invoked too much Coliseum.
Okay, go ahead, Amelia, with
All right.
starting with number 60.
So.
Point of interest, Commissioner Miller was not present for when these notes were originally put out, so is the one person who does not have access to the printed document that we.
Do you know, do we have any extras?
Oh, sorry, are we missing a
Set.
set? I can print some. I have notes on this one.
Okay, yeah,
It looks like Commissioner Halverson and Commissioner Miller can
Okay.
share a printed copy.
thank you.
So number 60 is based off of A 1.2 from the TCMP. The action description was provide education and incentives such as grants, loans, technical incentive or technical assistance to encourage practices that reduce emissions from manure and fertilizer. What we've got in CL 8B1 is provide technical and financial assistance such as grants, loans to encourage improved manure and fertilizer management along with other regenerative practices, prioritizing outreach to historically underserved communities. TCAT had some feedback that this still doesn't get quite at what they were saying. So there's a possible suggestion of adding greenhouse gas emission reduction.
It does also look like they suggested adding the word agriculture, so agricultural practices under regenerative practices.
Yeah, I'm not so sure if that's
Yeah, I think that
needed,
might be
talking
more
about
limiting.
manure and fertilizer already. But I'm not the commissioner here, so.
I wonder if we might,
Didn't get deep enough into the manure.
Only need these.
I wonder if we might want to also look at item 61 at the same time. These two items are very similar and they both seek to modify CL 8B.1. It might make sense to approach them both at the same time.
So, and there's CL 8.1, which could be good. So that 60 is talking about education incentives to reduce emissions from manure and fertilizer. A 2.1 is expand regenerative agriculture practices. They say a whole farm approach, which I don't know if that's necessarily a defined term. And then providing education for increasing organic matter content and water retention. So we do already kind of have that with CL 8A.1 and CL 8B.1, but I do think we could add greenhouse gas emissions specifically called out because we don't call that out in what we have. So that's my staff suggestion, but.
I think adding greenhouse gas emissions is perfectly reasonable in CL 8B.1. Is that where we're suggesting adding it?
Yeah, so what my suggestion would be to change it to provide technical and financial assistance, e.g. grants and loans, to encourage improved manure and fertilizer management, along with other regenerative practices, prioritizing greenhouse gas emission reduction and outreach to historically underserved communities.
I do like adding that. I do see in 61, that second sentence of their language, which is provide education on how to increase organic matter content and water retention in soils with urban and agricultural settings. It feels like that sentence could be added to the end of CL8B.1 as a single.
We don't really have urban agriculture in Thurston County.
That is a good point. With no urban settings, that last part does not make sense, does it?
The only kind of urban setting that we have in the county would be Grand Mound or some of the Lammerts.
It says urban and agricultural settings. If we scratched urban and simply said within agricultural settings.
Sure.
Makes sense. So what oh, go ahead, Commissioner Pessinger.
No, it's okay. I support everything you're suggesting. I support your recommendation. Also, I'm not shooting, I guess, what really is TCAT asking for. Are we reading that with these changes? I think, from my perspective, the view on manure and the worst use of fertilizer and manure, I mean, that usually has to do with using manure as an organic form of fertilizer on ground, which doesn't have to do with greenhouse gas emissions so much as not putting toxic chemicals into the soil and water. So I wonder whether that needs to be addressed, that concept.
Yeah, because that's a bit of both, and we're specifying one of the two different, like, one subset of environmental concerns.
It's a possibility that we could address that later in one of the agricultural items.
Yeah, there are other ones.
Yeah, there's a good chunk of agricultural ones here. I think that might make a little more sense for
That
that.
also might be good to bring up when we get to the natural resource lands chapter.
It's true.
Sounds good.
So just going over what we've suggested, if we take the revised second sentence from 61 and we're adding it to CL8B1 and we're adding greenhouse gases, it would read, provide technical and financial assistance, e.g. grants, loans, to encourage improved manure and fertilizer management, address greenhouse gas emissions address greenhouse gas emissions along with other regenerative practices, prioritizing outreach to historically underserved communities, provide education on how to increase organic matter content and water retention in soils within agricultural settings.
One small note in there, I would say prioritizing greenhouse gas emission reduction.
Good, yes.
Point.
Okay, so thumb check on that. Good. Then it looks like we've addressed 60 and 61.
Wonderful.
Well, I'm not yet.
Oh, you have something else on 61?
Yeah, or on, actually, it's on a lot of them. The term regenerative, I think that's I don't know that we want to specifically go into that. I mean, 10 years ago, we would have been saying we want everything to be no-till.
Yeah.
And so I know it's the big buzzword now. And it's really something that's been done for a long time. Just people put this word on it now. And we're looking at a 20-year plan. I can almost guarantee you in 5 to 10 years, there's gonna be a new word.
So it's too prescriptive by label and
Yeah, I think it's, I mean,
Is there a terminology you
I
think?
think the word is just too specific.
yeah.
Cause if we're gonna do this and then in 10 years, there's a new term out there.
I actually wonder if maybe Maya, when it gets to the natural resource lands chapter, if we could come up with a definition for what regenerative means in this version of the comp plan.
So if the terminology changes, we still have a definition we can reference.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
That makes sense.
But
I mean,
if
this
we-
will get revisited in 5 years, right?
No.
10 years. So, okay, so
We'd
I
like to
mean,
think
there are
so.
chances for, you can do a comprehensive plan amendment and there are chances to make adjustments, but the entire revision is every 10 years.
okay, so it sounds like we approved the language that we discussed and there is a to-do item for staff to find a point for a definition for regenerative agriculture. Are we in agreement on the to-do on that? just so staff have it for notes. Okay, and did you have another item, Commissioner
Well,
Pester?
it's tied into that. I support Commissioner Nelson's concerns about being too specific, and a term like no-till is very, very specific. I
Mhm.
would support not using terminology like that, an exact way of doing it, and say, no, not that way. I'd be curious to find out what the actual definition of regenerative, because I think it's pretty broad. I think it's along the lines of sustainable or in that type of nomenclature. So we'll see, but if it's broad, I'd be okay with it. If it's narrow, then I would be concerned.
And I'm sure some fertilizer companies are retaking it for their own definitions by now.
That's true, like natural.
Commissioner Casino and then Commissioner Bartlett.
Well, I have the same concerns about language too, just like we didn't want to get locked into CFLs when LEDs were coming along the same line.
Mhm.
And maybe the term that we would want to use is something more along like best practices or something like that. We've used best available science in some places, which is a very broad term. If we use best practices, I think we would be better off than using something that actually has a definition that could be co-opted.
Commissioner Bartlett?
I guess I'm a little, I would, my personal preference is that we label the term and then define it, because I do worry about getting too vague. Like in an attempt to be too broad, we can also create something, we would essentially be aiding that sort of like generalization or degradation of the term. I'm sorry, if you had more to say on that, I don't want to interrupt you there.
No, you're fine.
Okay, what regenerative specifically defines, and I'm looking at definitions right now, but it's about like topsoil regeneration, increasing biodiversity, improving water cycle, enhancing ecosystems, supporting biosequestration, increasing resilience to climate change, and strengthening the health and vitality of farm soil. So the specific difference from sustainability or no-till, like one, it's not prescriptive about a type, it's prescriptive about a result, and that result is not like least damaging, but like it has a specific like implicit goal to it of like you end the system, you end your agricultural term with it being better than you left it, basically.
Yeah, the definition I'm seeing online is regenerative agriculture is a holistic farming and grazing approach focused on restoring and enhancing the health of ecosystems, particularly soil, while improving food production and other ecosystem services. It aims to reverse climate change by rebuilding soil organic matter and biodiversity, which helps sequester carbon and improve the water cycle. That does not seem overly prescriptive to me. It seems pretty open.
As it exists now.
As it exists now, I would suggest, if the planning commission is open to it, that when we get to the natural lands chapter, we see that to-do item from staff, and I think there is enough room in the chapter for us to fine tune that broad label of what it means, so that if it ever becomes a question in 10 or 20 years, we have something to reference.
Cool.
There's no objections, and I'd like to move on to 63.
What about 62?
Oh, sorry, 62.
All right.
My apologies.
Okay, so this one is a 3.1. Their language from the TCMP is support farmland preservation through land use policies and financial incentives, e.g. conservation easements, to maintain production capacity and increase self-sufficiency. So this one, I think might be better suited in the natural resource lands chapter because it's not specifically climate focused. But also, I have a ton of related comprehensive plan policies for reference
I saw
that
that.
are listed. And if you will notice, most of them are in that natural resource lands chapter. So that is where I would suggest putting it. But then if we really like to keep at least one of these in the climate chapter, I was thinking maybe we add to CL8B2 because I think that goes hand in hand with that TCMP language. Or we could add to NR 188. Of course, those are not the only options here. Those were just what I was thinking could fit that one.
I do see IPLU 21, which says update policies, regulations, and programs to improve functionality and efficiency of conservation incentive programs. I think we could address their concern by simply adding, including in agricultural uses to the end in that.
Conservation incentive programs aren't always operating in the same line as agriculture and
Mhm.
farmland preservation.
Yeah, when they say conservation, they mean something different and specific.
Gotcha.
Well, not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessarily, but it doesn't mean the same thing,
Right. It includes a broad
Yeah.
range of.
like square versus rectangle.
Mhm.
All squares are rectangles, not all
Yeah.
rectangles are squares, gotcha.
I think, sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bartlett.
I agree with you about NR 1A8. I think that's probably the best place for it.
And so just for folks who are going to watch this in the future, NR 1A8 is continue to develop innovative strategies for the conservation of farmland and to encourage farmers to stay in agriculture, which does have a very similar line to the TCP.
So are you suggesting, is there an addition?
I am suggesting the possible addition of that entire TCMP language, the support farmland preservation through land use policies and financial incentives. And pulling that, and the rest, pulling that into NR 1A8.
Yeah, it could even just be like, for example, I mean, that's essentially what it is in there.
So basically, so what we're suggesting is taking NR 1A8 and adding the examples from their item 62 to that.
Or adding the language because it dovetails so neatly in, like merging the languages.
Getting the entirety of A 3.1 from the TCMP or a section of it.
Okay, well, let's get a feel for adding the entirety to that item. Is there any objections to that? Hearing none, so moved, well, so recommended, or this isn't formal.
I think CCAT will like that. Okay, so 63.
And this is what they can. Please keep growing our food.
Yeah.
I've grown about 40 beets in my raised bed so far this spring, but I cannot feed so many beets. I think my skin's starting to turn. But yeah, I do really appreciate actual farmers.
So 63, when I reviewed this, I was curious. It looks like the tree conservation practices are already in code.
Yes, so the A 4.4 is add clearing limits, usually expressed as a percentage for large lot development in county and city zoning codes. So this we do have in Thurston County Code 17.27, which has come out since the TCMP. So obviously this didn't exist when they created. This is focused on class 4 forest practice permits, which means clearing for development. And so we do already have clearing limits.
So we have, it doesn't need to be in the implementation plan because we have already achieved the item, is
Yeah.
what you're saying.
In
And it sounds like-
2024, it was adopted.
And it sounds like their feedback is that the language that we already have is good.
Yeah, and so I think they just might not have known because our code sometimes takes a few months to get up on the website. So they might not have just been able to search for it.
No worries then. I would suggest that we take no action on 63 unless there is an objection. Commissioner Passenger?
I was part of that and it was very close and debated discussion. I was not happy with the end outcome. I think, and I've thought about it ever since then and think it needs to be revisited. I don't know when it's appropriate, but if this is a chance to even discuss it, I want to discuss it.
I don't know anything about it, so I would love some clarification.
Well, I might ask, Maya, do you think this might be a better subject for the natural resource lands chapter? And then you can get into more forestry practices?
Yeah, I would probably want to pull Claire in for that conversation. She's the person taking it over. It really kind of falls into, at least the canopy cover piece of it falls into the environment chapter. But the staff who worked on those code changes originally is gone. So we would want to come together as a team and chat about that before we bring that kind of information back to the Planning Commission.
But I will say when we're thinking about clearing limits and trees in the county, there are really two things you want to think about. There's the the watershed canopy, and then there's site-specific canopy. So I think trying to understand both of those is the direction I would recommend going.
Commissioner,
There are some limitations on like what you can require one person to do based on like overall watershed health, just because of nexus and proportionality when you're doing site-specific restrictions. King County ran into that when they had really restrictive clearing and grading permits. So it's a little bit tricky, but it's usually, I think, a little bit to Maya's point and the work that Claire's been doing on the overall canopy assessment, and using that to drive the kinds of decisions you make about clearing and grading limits is the best practice, really.
so to address your concerns, because it sounds like we've achieved the actual stated goal here, but your concern is that the numbers that we came to, or the policy we came to, isn't great, and we don't want this to be something that we've washed our hands clean of and we don't touch it again. Perhaps there is a new climate implementation plan that says to regularly review the Thurston County Code for tree conservation practices, considering clearing limits for large lot development in county and city zoning area codes. So we've already done the item, but we're adding a new item that just says that we should regularly review that. Regularly is ambiguous enough that the community can drive it, but they can also point to the fact that we advocated for it something in the implementation plan, so it's something we should do.
I would say something along the lines of monitor and review. There's also an NPDS permit requirement that requires the county to look at canopy more broadly over time. So that would be pretty in line with.
You're suggesting monitor and review the Thurston County Code for tree conservation practices with consideration for clearing limits, canopy cover, and what was the last bit?
I think it was, I don't remember.
What if we just said monitor and review clearing limits for large lot development and county zoning codes?
I would keep the watershed, because you want to keep it in context of watershed health.
Okay, and do we want to reference the tree conservation practices specifically in the code?
Those are part of it.
Where are you on, Daniel?
We are in
62.
63.
63, yeah.
Are you suggesting tying the monitoring to the NPDS permit?
We have a permit requirement.
But I mean,
track
this
it.
body to also review things at the same time Public Works is doing the NPDS permit.
I don't know that Public Works would be doing it. I think it's actually our team has been doing the canopy and GIS work. So it'd probably be us tracking and
Larry.
reporting that in CPED.
Larry does that.
Mhm.
Okay,
Larry is the overseer of our permit, like
Yeah.
he's the coordinator of it. It pulls in multitude departments and staff. So the NPDS permit includes land use planning, like we have to report on land use planning that we do that relates to stormwater. We report on canopy cover. The Department of Ecology is looking to track canopy change.
maybe I don't understand Commissioner Pessinger's concern here so much, but like I appreciate the work that Stormwater is doing on reviewing all these kind of things, especially when they're renewing their permits. But I think that maybe I'm mischaracterizing this, that we would like to see more of that review happen in this body, or at least seeing how that's being done.
And I think the way that it would probably work is we would be able to use the information that we get from the reporting that we do to ecology. That could be something like if this body wants to regularly check in on how we're doing as far as canopy cover across the county or even in specific watersheds.
Is that review, it's a 5-year review?
I don't know how often we need to report that. It might, I don't know what the interval is. I could check into that though.
If we could, Commissioner Bartlett?
My comment was a yes, and I like the direction we're going with this particular piece of policy, but I am really interested in in learning more about what happened with the previous county code there, and like maybe if there is something within land use that we can do to discuss it. So I guess I'm interested in adding this, but still having a little, part when we get to land use of a little bit of discussion of the code.
If I'm understanding where we're at right now, we're going to use monitor and review as the language here, not add. So it would be monitor and review clearing limits for large lot development in county, which would be county zoning codes, because city is not our business to review, correct?
County zoning codes and watersheds?
I would say and watersheds.
And watersheds. Okay, so with that language, are we in agreement? Any objections to adding that? Okay, no objections. So that's a new implementation plan item.
Okay.
And it sounds like when we get to land use, that is a topic that we need to revisit. Right? Move
Okay.
to 64.
Yeah, so this one is update permitting requirements to increase the required stream buffer size to increase carbon sequestration. So this one, I actually, it is kind of mentioned in the tree conservation practices, but it's also in chapter 24-25-030. And there are codes for increasing buffers, decreasing buffers, changing it based on each site. So we do already have code on this, but I don't see that there is much of a problem of adding this,
And we did
but
just-
saying something like according to best available science.
We did just add water use, I'm sorry, what was the
Watersheds.
watersheds to that new implementation item. Does that address that at all?
For 64?
Not exactly.
64 is focused on stream buffers.
Yeah, and it's also, their addition here is specifically about connectivity corridors for large terrestrial mammals that require larger habitat. Like that's a pretty specific call out that's not mentioned anywhere else in there. We have talked about it in the past as a group.
Yeah, most of these buffers that we're talking about would be covered in the shoreline master program. And we have pretty aggressive buffers in that shoreline master program.
have very aggressive buffers.
So
You disagree with that?
As compared to other jurisdictions.
Yeah, they're pretty aggressive.
Just a moment and then I'll call you. So it sounds like this might be another good opportunity to accurately equate, since we have a difference of opinion on how appropriate our current shoreline master program is. It does address the concern, so the idea that we need to update, maybe we can use that monitor and review again for incorporation.
Critical areas ordinances are also gonna be a place where this comes into play, and we just got a grant to be able to do a really intensive analysis of site potential tree height across the county, as well as like tree species identification. So we'll have a lot of information that we'll be building into the critical areas ordinance updates as well.
Right, go ahead, Commissioner Bartlett.
It's all kind of moving in this direction.
Yeah. I guess my only, what I would suggest, given what they were saying here, what their concerns were maybe can have some of that provide viable habitat connectivity for large terrestrial mammals, if that's something that we're interested in. That would be something that would go into A4, maybe as an example of like one of the things that could be benefiting.
Where are we looking at A4?
Mitigate the impacts of increased temperatures to local waterways. Is that the right one?
A4 is their item.
Or yeah.
So what specific item of our code are you suggesting we?
CL4, A4.
Am I on the right one? I just missed it. Oh, actually, it looks like it's CL7A4. Yeah, that makes more sense because that other one was specifically about increased temperatures. So establish incentives and regulations to maintain open space buffers to increase resilience to climate impacts such as heat islands effects. So that one, it does mention resilience to climate impacts. We could also add migratory habitat corridor for migratory or moving wildlife.
What about, so CL7A4, establish incentives and regulations to maintain or increase
Yeah.
open space buffers? That kind of touches on one part of their comment, open space buffers to increase resilience to climate impacts,
So
or here.
They said,
Because
so
we also
their
wanna
item
fit
said
in-
increased carbon sequestration, but
Yeah.
their comments suggest large terrestrial mammals.
Let's see, so to increase resilience increase carbon sequestration, and provide a viable habitat connectivity corridors. I don't know if we want to necessarily call out just large terrestrial mammals,
Yeah.
because small ones matter too.
I would agree.
I would agree.
But,
So did the gophers.
yeah, the
So-
pocket
so-
gopher.
Could you read that back one last time for us?
No, just kidding. Yes, of course. I will do my best. So CL7A4 would be edited to say establish incentives and regulations to maintain or increase open space, should we say, or riparian buffers?
That makes sense.
Okay. Buffers to increase climate resilience, carbon sequestration, and
Provide viable habitat
provide
connectivity.
viable habitat connectivity
Just corridors.
corridors. Oh, just viable
Okay.
habitat corridors?
That makes sense.
And I don't know if we need to say such as.
Right.
Because I think we know.
We don't need to be that
what's coming.
specific, I don't think.
Okay, and that way it's already such a long run-on sentence, we don't need to make it even worse. Okay,
Any objections to that as revised?
and I will
I
read it
think-
one more
I think when we're talking specifically about buffers, that's a critical areas and a shorelines type of deal. Not so much a code. And we can't, and we're saying maintain and increase, but we don't know what the best available science is gonna say. And we do have, right now, our riparian buffers are very large. And they do consider terrestrial habitat. And I can tell you when it went through, it was, for me, it's bad because because what the critical areas says is it doesn't matter what you're doing.
Mhm.
Even if you have big open fields, we don't want you to touch this 250-foot buffer. Well, if you've got an open field, you aren't changing any connectivity for deer and elk or bears or anything else.
I would point out, we did not use and, we used or.
So maintain or increase. So
Yeah,
yeah, that
so
would,
it's not mandating an increase, it's leaving increases as an option.
so I'm
But
gonna
it's
read
not
it.
leaving reductions as an option if they're acceptable.
Well, this is establish incentives to maintain or increase.
Yeah.
So it's not, I absolutely see what you're saying, because especially stuff like that, we don't wanna harm ag. So it's establish incentives to maintain or increase, not maintain or increase. So it's a carrot.
Mhm.
There's no stick here. And I'll read the whole thing out. So establish incentives and regulations to maintain or increase open space or riparian buffers to increase climate resilience, carbon sequestration, and provide viable habitat corridors. So it's just focus on incentives for that.
It's no prohibitions in that.
No prohibitions, we would still
No.
keep the ability.
Regulations can go a few different
Regulation
ways.
goes to stick.
As someone who supports this,
Yeah.
I will say.
But not listed out here.
Right, it's giving examples of some of the things that we might use this for, and I do think that, I mean, if we're talking about best practices, I think that's probably gonna be. I have trouble imagining a circumstance where the increasing resilience, best practices are going to be narrowing corridors. I do understand that there's other balancing concerns, but given what this is specifically talking about, I don't think that that would end up coming in there. So if this is our priority, that would be what's already in it too.
Some of the prairie restoration people have different feelings.
And if,
It's they've run into barriers with restoring prairie, with stream buffers.
so it sounds like,
Counterpoint to that with what we're saying here, which is that like, we've actually just made that a little bit easier because we've added habitat connectivity in here in addition to some of the climate concerns. So that gives them something to balance it against when they're talking about these corridors.
so
Because they can be increasing a prairie habitat corridor and decreasing another one.
So it sounds like, as proposed, this is offering possible tools. It is not prescribing an exact change, and any such change would have to go through the BOCC, correct? So this does not implement a change it's literally just listing possible tools. So with that in mind, based on the language that we have here, let's do a thumbs check on where we're at, since we are of mixed opinion on that.
Thumbs or nods, maybe.
Thumbs are what?
Nods.
I'll do thumbs.
Thumbs are clear.
Okay.
I would feel a whole lot more comfortable with this if we focused on the carrots and not the sticks.
And so it looked like we were 5 up,
Five, yeah.
2 down, 3 down.
5 up, 3 down, yeah.
So the change
Okay.
moves forward.
Right, we'll make that edit to CO 7A4. So 64, this one TCAT does not have edits to what we said here. Let me check their
You're
other.
65.
65, yeah,
Cool, we can move on.
I know how to read. All right, that one's a big one. So 66 is A 6.5. This one is maximize tree canopy on jurisdiction owned or managed land where appropriate in balance with other jurisdictional goals.
That's what we just talked about a few
Yeah.
previous.
And we acknowledge in our staff comments, this is primarily an urban action.
I think there is room for it to be a county action as well, but I think this would also be one you want to talk about with Claire and Maya on the natural resource lands chapter.
Would it make more sense if we were to add this as an item to add language at the beginning that said, work with county jurisdictions to maximize tree canopy on owned or managed land where appropriate in balance with other jurisdictional goals? So instead of us just saying we're gonna do it, because we don't really own all that much land, right?
We do own
now-
more prairie land, I think, than forest
All that
land.
HCP land.
Yeah.
HCP, we do own quite a bit of HCP land, for the Habitat Conservation Plan for prairies. There is, yeah, it's complicated.
So I wonder if this would be a better conversation after in-depth with tree canopy talks, or?
I will say the language that we have now is very detailed. It says no later than December 31st, 2028, adopt and implement tree canopy goals and policies to support stormwater management. Permittees shall consider how existing or future tree canopy can support stormwater management and water quality improvements in receiving waters. Establish a long-term goal of canopy existing or future projection to be used for stormwater management that is appropriate to the jurisdiction. Specific considerations for canopy for stormwater management on permittee owned or operated land shall include but not limited to A, maintaining and increasing canopy in overburdened communities, maintaining existing mature canopy, document considerations, reasoning and rationale for goals and policies.
I think we
Go to the
could add a few more
backside.
sentences there.
Yeah,
This
it's
is,
just so light on detail.
this is the permit requirement that I was referencing earlier. So this is the
That's
NPS
for-
permit requirement.
Yeah.
And this is for specifically stormwater management. Your stormwater and your climate goals are gonna be like essentially one-to-one overlap.
I'm sorry?
One-to-one overlap.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like the land the county does own is primarily prairie, which is not.
It won't always be that way. We'll be buying more and more HCP. And then, of course, we have a lot of not a lot, but we have some parklands.
I think that's the where appropriate does
Yeah.
do some heavy lifting there.
Yeah.
The county is actually not a huge landowner.
Go ahead, Commissioner Pessinger.
Sure. Question for staff. Previously, when we talked about tree canopy and, it's kind of, we got more data as we got through this process and you guys see more info on maps and whatnot. And I believe that Ashley's sort of characterization of things was that it was better than what she had expected, but then she was also shocked at how little opportunity there is for any expansion. Have you seen anything more to confirm that or different to that?
That's our kind of working premise right now. There isn't as much opportunity in the analysis that we did where there aren't those competing interests between like prairie preservation or even prairie restoration, which could move to remove trees off of prairies. So there wasn't as much opportunity as we thought there was. There's probably a lot more opportunity in, I think one of the places that we see is projects like the Nisqually Community Forest. Like that's probably where our big opportunities are in doing more of that work. And that's not necessarily, like county participates in activities like that, but isn't necessarily a driver.
Right.
Could be maybe, but community forest models.
So question for staff first, if we were to add their language, obviously replacing the word jurisdiction with county. So maximize tree canopy on county owned or managed land where appropriate and balance with other jurisdictional goals. Does staff have any issue with that as an item?
I actually have an idea.
Great
Um,
ideas.
that supports not just county and other agencies, but also community partners like the land trust and community forest. Support community partners to maximize tree canopy where appropriate, because we don't want to ruin our prairies in balance with other jurisdictional goals.
Cool,
That doesn't address county-owned land, though.
No,
because we're trying
but
to
I think
expand
that
it beyond
does
that.
encompass it, like it's still part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, we've turned it from a square into a rectangle.
That's such a terrible metaphor, but okay.
Sorry.
Oh, we're fine. Okay, so we have some proposed language from Amelia. How do we feel?
I would add one amendment. I would say to maximize tree canopy and improve forest management. Cause there is not necessarily just the like canopy, the management of the forests, if they're still working forests, can be important.
Tumwater and Olympia are hiring foresters like this.
Working forests.
Okay, so with that addition, could you read it back to us?
Absolutely. So the current suggested language is support community partners to maximize tree canopy and improve forest management where appropriate with other jurisdictional, in balance with other jurisdictional
So
goals.
this is a new,
Yeah.
Yes.
okay, cause on the
Yeah.
backside, they also talk about protecting structurally complex mature tree stands with at least 25% of trees over 100 years in age.
5A6.
Huh?
5A6.
Yeah, and then develop forestry management plans. The county owns forest land, so that's talking specifically about the county. Maintain commercially viable forest, promote recreational opportunities and maximize hydrologic outputs of the forest. I mean, we're duplicating a lot of stuff, it seems.
The difference, I think, is this is supporting community partners. That's
I
the
understand.
addition.
Yeah,
So this is for county land. So.
yeah, but it's all basically the same thing to me.
So it sounds like it may be a little repetitive, but it doesn't sound like it is harmful, at least from what I'm hearing here. So let's do a temperature check on that language. Where are we at?
I can go either way on it.
Okay, and, it looks like we
I
have
just-
I hear you.
I'm getting a lot of.
six
things in there.
yeses and two
Tracking that
abstentions.
stuff.
So
Okay.
that's a yes to move
And
forward.
that I will add to the climate chapter policy.
Honestly, the most I see out of it, it sort of adds another weight to the thing that's already in there.
I'm
That's
just
what I'm
afraid that
looking
it's diluting county's
already-
responsibility by saying this is a community action.
Well, it does, to Commissioner Halverson's point, for county owned land, there is already an item on that. So it doesn't really need to be addressed for the county level land again.
I think this horse is on its last legs, so at risk of putting it off of its last one. I think the difference here would be that this would call the county to work with partners to do some of the same work on non-county land.
Yeah.
So
So it's an expansion that they didn't really ask for, but we think might be a good idea.
Yeah.
No harm in that.
Above and beyond.
it's a place where I think we do see opportunity.
Right, I would be comfortable with moving on to 67 then. And it does
Cool.
look like TCAT acknowledges that their item is urban focused.
Yeah,
There's or you guys had a suggestion on there.
yeah, we could add some possible language on equity, especially since tree canopy cover does bring health benefits often. So traffic slowing, reduction in heat domes, reduction in air pollution, And we could also possibly put climate resilience in this existing language, but ideas.
That sounds a lot like CL7B2. So that might be a good supporting spot.
Yes. So this one is set goals for future forest canopy and prairie acreage to increase resilience, considering the competing and equitable distribution of their climate resiliency benefits.
So we would just add equity language to that.
Well, it does have a little, but yeah,
Yes.
it's an equitable distribution of climate resiliency benefits.
Yeah.
It rolls off the tongue.
I like it.
So that's a pretty minor change. How do we feel about that?
What is your suggested change?
I don't know that we need to change it if it already has equitable in it. At most, what we would be doing there, correct me if I'm wrong on this, would be specifying, and that's not like, that's if we wanted to go with that. I just feel like it's like, that would be where it's covered.
So how about this too, because it talks about climate resiliency benefits, we simply add health, safety, and climate resiliency benefits.
Yeah.
That addresses those 2 points, I believe. Any objections to adding health and safety, since we're just detailing how this thing can be helpful in that way?
We're saying what we mean by equitable. 'Cause
Yes.
equitable could be impacting other aspects, does impact other aspects too.
Yes, it adds a point of justice almost to it, which is nice without actually saying justice. So no objections to that slight tweak.
And that is 467, a 6.9.
All right,
Right.
68.
Into 68.
So 68, the TCMP action is support aggressive implementation of habitat conservation plans that provide for preservation and restoration of prairie habitat for endangered and threatened prairie species. There is a note there about sequestration was not assessed for the TCMP. So we do have some language on this already, but I'd like to see what you guys think, if you want to add. Rebecca Harvey did say that she believes this is already covered by IPCL 23.
PCL 23.
And for the record, Rebecca Harvey is our climate mitigation senior program manager at Thurston County.
I think the problem with this might be that the county has a very definitive HCP, and TCAT is using HCP as a general term and doesn't really reflect the county's specific program.
I'm sorry.
I don't disagree with that at all. I'm just, let's see.
And our
I guess-
HCP is specific to species,
Yeah.
not, we call it a habitat conservation program, but it's very specific to 5 listed species, or 5 or 4.
So looking at it,
Whatever it is.
looking at their suggestion, one of the things they're requesting is striking the words where feasible from H5A5. So right now it reads, preserve environmentally sensitive lands, farmlands, forest lands, prairies, and rural lands from future developments where feasible. Such lands may be identified in multiple places such as the Habitat Conservation Plan.
I mean, I like where infeasible is not gonna fly there regardless. I mean, I guess you could strike where feasible, but like I think it would be implicit regardless. But if not, I have no strong feelings on that.
Yeah, preserve is already a pretty weak
Yeah.
action word there, I think, in some ways.
Reserve is about as strong as you get.
Yeah, exactly.
But we could say maybe,
I guess I'm just wondering what where feasible's doing.
Having us not do takings of people's
Yeah.
land.
Okay.
It's a
That's
big,
the
it's
big
a
one.
heavy one.
Okay.
We're treading into some uncomfortable territory
Yeah.
there, so,
Legit.
yeah.
so I wonder if then maybe we could, they're saying that where feasible is weak language. It sounds like it is a needed caveat. Perhaps we can modify, maybe you said preserve and restore environmentally sensitive lands, farmlands, forest lands, prairies, and rural lands from future,
Feasible.
and leave the where feasible.
Yeah. I would, yeah, I'm not,
I'm not sure if it's needed, but
Yeah, I think this is preserving from future development, so restore.
oh yeah, that would make sense there. You're right.
Restore from future development.
I just know because they're talking about restoration of prairie habitats and nothing in here is talking about restoration.
No, that would be, if I was gonna add that anywhere, that would be in, and the restoration and the conservation or the habitat protection, restoration, conservation development, that might be either in CL 23 or yeah, honestly, that or where we already talked about it under CLB or 7B2, but I'm happy with CL 7B2 as it is, so. Maybe 23.
So do you feel that it's already covered by IPCL 23?
I think CL 23 and B2 are addressing it. The only thing that I could think maybe to change to maybe make them happy is to add the word aggressive on goals, set aggressive goals, but I don't know if that, we would gain a majority opinion on that.
Yeah, and I don't know how.
Odd word to put in the.
It is an odd word, like, cause goals should be achievable, right? But
Then we'd have to, put a definition for what we mean by aggressive.
it's, okay, so it sounds like we don't have a majority opinion on a modification here, so let's just temperature check where we're at on no change to existing language for this item.
Well, the only thing that I saw was on CL 7B2 was to add health and safety.
Yeah,
Yeah, we've got that.
That was
in
the
there.
change.
That was the change we made in the previous item, yes. So with that change, I think no one's objecting to moving on and not making any additional changes.
so 69 is G1.7. The TCMP action is work with higher education institutions to research effective behavior change through marketing and education. Use this information in developing campaigns to reduce high emissions greenhouse gases. Staff notes. I don't know how much the county can really help with behavioral research. But we can possibly do some work here. Rebecca Harvey's note was that she doesn't think this item is necessary. There's already a large body of research demonstrating that structural and policy changes are more impactful than education and marketing affecting environmental behaviors.
What does our health department do in that regard?
And that I am not sure.
Cause that's where that would go, I would think.
Yeah, and we haven't done a review of the health element for this one.
Maybe, but it's about getting people to emit less more than anything.
Well, and it's researching behavioral change to see what would work to make people emit less and.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we're gonna be doing that kind of a study at all.
I would argue that we probably don't need higher education for necessarily for studies. I do see potential in CL1.C.3 to just call out higher education institutions as a potential organization to partner with on the educational part, or even just educational institutions.
Well, we do have a few policies like foster equitable partnerships with organizations serving overburdened communities to promote and implement energy education and incentive programs that alleviate energy cost burdens for residents. We also provide climate education to agricultural producers. In public communications and outreach efforts include messages on the impacts of climate change on health and safety, help residents plan and practice actions.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only modification I could potentially see here is like a parentheses after organizations in CL1C3 that said including local higher education institutions.
Organizations and educational institutions,
I feel like it's
because that also includes schools, K through
because
12.
the kids can do a lot of educational stuff too.
There is a wonderful program with the Nisqually Reach Education Program or project, so many acronyms. They take kids out to do nearshore ecology research. They teach them how like they cut up salmon and learn how salmon. So it's like K-12 is just as important as higher education.
I would agree, and I think that the youngest generation is sometimes the most persuasive people to do that kind of educational work. So how do we feel about simply adding partnerships with organizations and local educational institutions? Is that what we're saying, or local?
Or just educational institutions,
And
because I
educational
doubt we're gonna
institutions.
reach out to King County elementaries.
So just adding and educational institutions to that educational part.
I mean, who does the stream team program in the county?
We do.
That's what I thought. So
So we're already doing that.
you're already doing it.
So we're not,
Was this aimed at the Wazoo Extension Campus? Is this what this was, or were
I
they
couldn't speak
going
to it.
after Evergreen or SPSCC or?
They didn't tell us in their notes.
yeah, it's simply, they simply said that universities have more money, bandwidth, and student resources to perform some of this work.
Because the Wazoo Extension Campus, we already have a pretty intertwined relationship with.
They're under CPED.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see harm in adding educational institutions to this item. I would like to check to see where we're at on that. Does anyone have an objection to adding educational institutions?
We're not educated, let's do it aggressively.
I know this is a taxing conversation
So
for
partnerships with
changes.
organizations and aggressive educational institutions, only the kung fu.
I mean, I'm just, the local karate and jujitsu schools would count as educational institutions. We will karate chop climate change.
Never know. But I did not see an official,
I asked for
Temperature check.
objections and I heard none.
okay,
So it sounds like that is,
no objections means
Yes.
great, add it, okay.
sorry.
All right, I will add that language. 70 just includes some general strategies to support a green local economy.
And they had no feedback.
They did actually, it looks
Sure.
like they wanted to add to CL9A4.
Oh, there it is.
Consistent with Thurston County's climate mitigation goals and needs. Already, our climate policy is meant to be consistent with our climate mitigation goals and needs, so I'm not sure if that's necessary, but I'm not the decision recommender here.
Isn't that literally CL9A3?
Promote sustainability and resilience in rural areas supporting economic development initiatives consistent with Thurston's climate mitigation and adaptation goals and needs. So it's already there in A3. I would argue that no change needs to be made there. Is there any objection to making no change and moving on to 71?
71.
No objections. 71.
So this one is G4.1, prepare and publish an annual emissions inventory that tracks greenhouse gas emissions by jurisdiction and source category. Review and update emissions inventory methodology as necessary to address improvements to data or methodologies, improve consistency, incorporate changes to state or federal policies, or report on issues of local interest. We do have several related IP actions here. Also, the state does the GHG inventory as of right now, commerce.
They also do the VMT analysis.
Yeah, so I don't know how much we need to add here, but Rebecca Harvey, our climate mitigation senior program manager, did suggest modifying IPCL5 to a longer version that says update GHG inventory and VMT analysis every 3 to 5 years to monitor GHG reduction initiatives, review and update emission. And so she pulled in that language.
Do
from
they have the
TCP.
capacity to do that? I don't think they do. I mean, we've had a hard time just doing regular studies on a 5-10 year basis. Let
I
alone a
would
3
leave
to
that
5
answer
year.
to a manager if we have capacity.
And
Right.
I do not know that we do.
Yeah, everything I've heard, we're stretched so thin right now, you don't even have enough people to cover the issues on the docket.
Rebecca is also the only full-time staff in our climate program.
Yeah.
so this is Rebecca's recommendation though, right?
She may want a bigger team.
So
That's my, oh, sorry.
what I would say is what she's suggesting is adding the second sentence of the TCMP action at the end of CL5. And I think that language uses as necessary in a way that that would give us a good bit of flexibility there.
I think the key there is actually that you're gonna review and update the emission inventory methodology. Because VMT and other things are just a proxy for whether or not there's anything in the air. We don't really know. They're using VMT and greenhouse gas emissions as a calculation, but nobody is actually checking the air. So if we have the opportunity to update that methodology with, we get some funding or we get a new program or new technology or something like that, that's where the opportunity comes in.
So instead of as necessary, we would say, where feasible,
When available.
when available. Well, because right now it says review and update emissions inventory methodology as necessary to address improvements to data or methodologies, improve consistency, incorporate changes to state or federal policies, or report on issues of local interest. I don't love that last little bit, but Commissioner Bartlett.
I mean, it sounded like that Rebecca had a little bit more concise of a addition on that than the full thing, but I mean, yeah, I really like the idea of updating our methodologies, because I think that could end up saving us some of this in the future, and it does raise an opportunity for us to get grants and things like that if it's in there for that. I see it as a potential to streamline it maybe.
I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of, I just see another potential opportunity for another FTE
Mhm.
In a
Like you-
particular department or section. And this is the justification.
Mhm.
And I don't particularly care for that, because right now, all the county can do is cut FTE. Just
This is a
saying.
20-year plan, though. Our current financial situation is not our financial situation in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
We're very optimistic.
I can be optimistic.
Be worse.
This is an aspirational document in my mind.
10 years of this.
I guess, yeah. That is why I like that it is talking about the methodology though, like it might make it easier. I'm just thinking about like,
Yeah.
like if we're going to have any cost saving in it, it would require that, you know?
So if I could ask Amelia,
But yeah. I
you
get
you
that.
mentioned that that Rebecca used that language. Did she use the full sentence?
I can read it out loud and we can try to see where things line up. So she suggested modifying IPCL 5, so probably keep that sentence of IPCL 5, then update GHG inventory and VMT analysis every 3 to 5 years to monitor GHG emission reduction initiatives, and that's where that IPCL 5 ends.
Mhm.
Review and update emissions inventory methodology as necessary to address improvements to data or methodologies. And where the difference is, she says expand emission sources or sectors, incorporate changes to state or federal policies, and or report on issues of local interest.
So she removes improve consistency and adds.
And adds expand emission sources or sectors.
So if we get new data that we could potentially incorporate.
Maybe there's a new technology with different emissions that we hadn't been tracking before.
All right,
Test
let's
on either.
temperature check where we're at on Rebecca's suggestion on that.
I trust Rebecca.
She hasn't led me astray yet, so.
Just, yeah.
So, sorry, I didn't catch. And you,
Different.
you're indifferent as well, Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor and one not in favor and 2 indifferent, so.
So majority for Rebecca's addition to IPCL 5 to mostly match
Mhm.
the TCMP language.
See where this is going.
I'm not sure how feasible it is. I also don't think that language requires us to do anything, so.
All right. So then 72 is G 4.2. This one is develop performance measures to determine progress towards greenhouse gas reduction targets and other regional goals, regularly update and publicize for community to track their progress. We don't have that. I got nothing. So what would you like to do?
We do reporting right now. internal, correct?
I don't know what Rebecca's office does. I just added what we have in the comp plan.
Gotcha.
Through CL 97 you're talking about?
Yeah,
I think there's that addition of IPCL 97 is TCAT's suggestion.
open use performance measures.
Well, we're doing something because we've got the Sustainable Thurston report card that we have to reply to WestDOT on VMT targets for all county vehicles and equipment.
And I think with your last one, you gave enough flexibility that if you find a new way to measure stuff, you can.
Yeah,
Just identify and quantify.
I
services.
feel like the changes we've already made to the previous item largely
end up
address
covering
this. They actually also address 73, which talks about expanding sources, which is the item she added. So
cool.
I would argue that we can make no changes to 72 or 73, that the changes we've already made address them. So what do we feel about moving past 72 and 73?
Yeah, because it's almost exactly word for word, the other piece.
Yep.
3 to 5 years to monitor emissions reduction initiatives, et cetera.
So Rebecca was working ahead.
Rebecca is awesome.
Wonderful. So on to 74.
Yeah, so this is G 4.4. The TCMP action is develop a data and monitoring mechanism that is specific to marginalized groups and their needs related to climate change and climate reality, such as access to transportation, access to air conditioning, proximity to cooling centers, and develop a plan to address these vulnerabilities with solutions that help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we do have a few things in the IP, which is utilize environmental justice audit processes for land use and transportation, seek to address disproportionate environmental and health impacts from climate change. We have IPCL 7, which is promote the use of health impact assessments for health equity and climate change on vulnerable communities. We've
It's a
got,
very detailed list.
It
Yeah.
is, and it looks like their suggestions, they have two. One is to scratch the word, to scratch the language that says avoid development standards that could increase the cost of housing and replace it with adopt measures that keep housing costs affordable while implementing needed energy efficiency and climate-friendly development standards.
so that's where we get into the mess of what does affordable mean?
yeah.
Yeah,
Affordable means things very differently than sometimes folks showing up to meetings versus folks who can't.
so what if we,
I disagree. I think affordable is defined by the federal housing.
that is a good point. We do use those thresholds.
We do, there is the AMI if we wanted to use that instead of affordable, if we wanted to use a specific number.
I like the idea of using a specific number rather than making it the sustainable of, economic justice.
Affordable is defined as 30% of the total AMI. And
Which we have like none of.
total housing costs, it includes your rent or your mortgage, but it also includes things like insurance, utilities, maintenance.
Rural County has almost no housing in that bracket, if I'm not incorrect.
Which is part of why we're looking at the Grand Mound changes here. That we, yeah.
We're gonna push everybody down there.
I wonder if we could use the existing language, and so currently says, avoid development standards that could increase the cost of housing. What if instead of adopt measures that keep housing costs affordable, since they aren't affordable, and so we're not keeping them there right now, we simply add the while implementing needed energy efficiency and climate-friendly development standards. So it would read, avoid development standards that could increase the cost of housing while implementing needed energy efficiency and climate-friendly development standards.
You're looking at 75, right?
I'm looking at 74.
74 and the TCAT notes for IPCL 7.
Additionally, I will say they have a second suggestion on equity, and I don't like their language change. It does not make sense to me.
So
So,
we're talking about keeping.
I
good.
think it's an important distinction what you just said about what the request is, because they're saying instead of having this very limiting language that says if you do anything that would increase the cost of housing, which any change to doing anything in housing increases the cost
Mm-hmm.
mostly. which would limit or make you not do a lot of things. They're saying, let's do both at the same time. Let's balance those two needs, which I think is very important. I would strongly encourage us to find a way to balance those needs rather than just saying it's all or nothing.
I agree.
Yeah, I
Just
just,
trying to figure out how to word that.
I dislike their language because it starts, what's predicated on keeping something that doesn't currently exist in rural county.
Yeah.
And so I think, personally, I think the closest we can get to that language with what we've got would be adding the while implementing needed energy. So taking just the second half of their suggested language and adding it to our current language about not increasing costs.
I mean, or make would be, replace, keep with make would get us there too.
I mean, why aren't we saying, because no increase to housing costs is still problematic, why aren't we saying something like create as much affordable housing as possible while also doing this?
Oh, yeah.
Well, so we're not creating the housing, right? We set development standards. We set coding and stuff. So that's where I would push back on that.
Okay.
So encourage rather than create.
Implement things that will create.
Well, I don't know.
Oh, implement things that will create.
How many units
Talking
has the
about-
health department purchased this year? Quite a few.
Not our health department, unless you're talking about state.
In conjunction with. I mean, there was a good conversation about it at a meeting at the Board of County Commissioners just recently. About how many units Olympia, Thurston County, et cetera, had
Oh.
Regional partnership.
regional partnership.
And that's something that I'm interested in us encouraging, so that makes sense.
So and there was several millions of dollars that were in this fund to do this.
Yeah.
I think what we're shooting for is promoting affordability. And I think it might even be worth teasing out the purchase price and ownership costs.
So it sounds to me like this one particular item is something that maybe staff could noodle. Maybe, or no, is it just too much to tackle?
I think there's already a bit
I
of
like
different opinions coming in here that staff would absolutely not make everyone happy.
Oh,
I like what Mr. Day just suggested.
You know, say your language.
I think it would be, so let's see here, it says.
I do want to point out that it does already currently say work towards a distribution of growth that promotes equitable access to frontline communities and reduces the potential for displacement through program services. This can include municipal emergency preparedness, affordable energy prices, and accountable utilities. Services should integrate consideration of climate impacts such as extreme heat, flooding, wildfire, smoke, and drought.
That seems like an urban core issue.
That's what we already have in our
It
language.
doesn't, I know, but that does not, I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying, that's an urban core issue. It's not something that the UGA and the rural area is going to get involved in. Based on our own criteria.
I think the way that this would operate is that this basically says that we would be working to make sure that development happens in places that promote these.
Yeah, it would be an incentive for pushing it to the
Okay.
cities in some way.
I think that's how it would work.
That's how it would work, right? Well, that's what I was talking about with the Department of Health and working with the regional partners on housing and stuff, but again, I don't see that as being something that goes into our plan at the county level. I just don't. I mean, but I'm just one voice.
I am interested in what Mr. Day had to say about that. Like you had language and Commissioner Pessinger was
It's
interested in
actually
hearing it. We kind of had a little crosstalk over it.
So why don't we just go to the second bullet, which is the one in question, right? It says prioritize the development of anti-displacement programs in overburdened communities when increasing densities, incorporate measures to improve affordability in zoning and in urban and rural areas, and avoid development standards that could increase the cost of housing. And I think it would be promote development standards that promote development standards that improve affordability. So I would.
You got to take urban out of the sentence for me.
I mean, if we just cut out, yeah, urban and rural there.
Yeah, I don't think it really needs urban and rural there,
Yeah.
just in zoning.
Ability,
So
or just to improve affordability.
I think the only place where it really would apply is Grand Mound, maybe the Lammerts, or possibly UGA's.
Yeah, so
Important areas to have.
and their consideration is basically, hey, that's great, but also can you add climate change on there? But we've already put that in the introduction sentence that's already talking about health, equity, and climate change.
Yeah, their note is that the language or the lack of that has been used to resist,
Well,
electrification standards and stuff like that.
I'm gonna go back to the housing chapter.
Mhm.
When we talked about ADUs, detached and attached ADUs, and there was a lot of discussion amongst people here that they didn't want to see detached ADUs because it took up more space. And you wanted to limit it to one instead of multiple.
Mm-hmm.
I know we haven't finished that chapter, I don't believe,
Mm-mm.
but that seems like that's where that goes versus in this particular chapter under climate change. I don't know.
What if we said promote a balance of environmental building standards and affordability?
Or promote development standards that keep housing costs affordable while,
Again, it's the key.
yeah, I don't know if their language makes this better.
No.
If I'm being entirely honest, because we've already, I get that they want to add details to this very long item in the second bullet, but it is nested under the statement that says that we are going to address the potential impacts of health, equity, and climate change. So I think we've already addressed it with that introductory
And on
sentence.
vulnerable communities, which are often people who need affordable housing.
I'm gonna put it out here, I don't think we need to incorporate their change, because I think that the sentence that these bullets are nested under already addresses their concern. So how do we feel on that?
Clarification question of that, I don't have it in front of me. Does the current statement that we have say, don't do anything that's gonna increase the cost of housing?
It says avoid development standards that could increase the cost of housing.
Yeah, so I'm not good with that. That needs to change.
That is, it specifically, it says that when developing anti-displacement programs.
Yeah, I'm not good with that.
Yeah, that is our current language.
Yep, and I'm not good with it. I think it needs to change.
How do you want it to change?
The balance.
Okay, so.
So a balance of climate friendly and affordable building standards.
There you go. Sold.
Yeah.
So
Good work, Amelia.
For IPCL 7, where they mention replace the following phrase with the other phrase, I just disagree with them on that.
Oh, yeah, I think we're all,
Yeah.
that's just bad grammar, and it puts the climate before
yeah,
health and equity. I don't agree with that at all.
For Commissioner Tetzler's change.
Yeah, agreed.
So with that slight change to balance, where are we at? Any objections?
So here, I'll say the language right now for folks who listen to this later. The change currently being reviewed is a change to the second bullet on IPCL 7. For it to now say prioritize the development of anti-displacement programs in overburdened communities when increasing densities. Incorporate measures to improve affordability in zoning in urban and rural areas and promote a.
You took out urban and rural.
Yeah.
Did we want to take that out?
It's not necessary.
I see a general, okay,
Yeah, because it's like, it's the areas at that point.
okay.
Specified
We haven't addressed suburbs, I guess, but whatever. Like, it's
Anyway.
functionally meaningless.
And promote development standards that balance, or wait, promote a balance of climate friendly and affordable building standards. Sorry, there were a lot of,
Yes, I mean, it does already say improve affordability just before that,
It's affordability and zoning.
huh?
It's affordability and zoning.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
so,
So any objections to that language, as Amelia just shared it? Hearing none.
Okay.
75, last one. We will have made it to the end.
76 too.
Is there a 76? I don't have a 76.
Yeah, there's a 76. It's just way down there.
There's, did we skip 75?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't have.
I don't have a 76.
Okay, I can
70
read 76 when we get to it.
So let's do 75.
76 is a while back, but I'll read it out later when we get it to there. Ooh, the Oklahoma came out. All right. G 4.6 is develop and adopt policies that require the use of a social cost of carbon measure in zoning, development, construction, and transportation decisions. We have kind of discussed several of those just recently, but we do have some similar language here about environmental justice audits, transportation, zoning, land use, industrial developments based on impacts for climate, disproportionate impacts of climate change on overburdened communities, and developing community-based resilience hubs.
Covers everything.
Yeah, and then it continues on. I added some more language from CL5 of other examples. That does not mean we covered that. It just means here's some language you can bounce off of or decide that it covers that.
I would say defining a social cost of carbon, which they say is a financial metric that assigns a dollar value to every ton of GHG emissions and includes the total cost of emissions in the cost benefit analysis for proposed projects, zoning changes, etc. That, I don't know who's developing that new standard. That feels like we're getting into permitting's territory. To me, this feels like an unneeded change and maybe outside of the scope of the planning commission. But that is where I'm at on that. I might sound a little bit like Commissioner Halverson on that one. I also don't know how we would fund doing this new thing. But that's,
There's so many regulations in this one 75 G46, quite frankly.
we're already regulating this. I don't see a need for a change there. That is where I'm at. I will,
I guess my question about that is that since they're talking about a specific term, is that term a useful definition that we can, a useful tool for this, or is it just adding another layer of obfuscation?
to me, it just feels like they're adding jargon.
I'm sorry, I was asking you. Amelia.
I think it would be another thing we would have to define that may be change as society changes along with it.
I agree.
So let's temperature check, making no additional changes. Okay, I'm in favor of no additional changes. Mr. Pessinger, do you have a strong feeling on this?
In the famous words of my friend here, that gives me no heartburn.
Right, and so it looks like we have a majority for not making any additional change for 75. I don't have a 76.
You have loose tongues in my desk if everybody does.
10 pages in.
Oh, because of I must have cut it because there was like several pages of things.
Yeah, so 76,
Prioritize climate mitigation policy in the municipality's legislative agenda each year. Instruct municipal lobbyists to track and report on climate bills and advocate for those bills that will help reduce local emissions. Work with other jurisdictions across the state to add this to priorities for the Association of Washington Cities and Washington State Association of Counties.
yeah, actually, it looks like they're agreeing with what we've got in here. It says, need to, their addition was, with other jurisdictions across the state to add this to priorities for the, those groups. So it's like, I'm looking at CL1D1, and that looks like it's largely covering, or like, it's largely, like, that's like pretty analogous to this.
And other regulatory bodies.
Yeah,
It's
so that's-
encompassing.
Yeah, it looks like that's like what we have in there, this is a subset of.
I think they
it's
just want it
use-
to be more specific.
Yeah, if it's useful for it to be more specific, I'm happy about that, but if it's useful for it to be more broad.
Well, and they specifically want the county to, they want to use the county to add this to priorities for the Washington State Association of Counties. That is something that we haven't addressed in
Oh,
here.
that's a good point.
That's really, I think, what they're at. They basically want this as a nudge or a lever to push the county to make this case to this larger body that we are a part of.
I guess that would just be the legislature and the, but
I wonder if that CL1D1 does, where it says advocate with the legislature, the utilities and transportation commission and other regulatory bodies. And I wonder if we could say to support climate mitigation policy
Mm-hmm.
and the transition of utility energy fuel mixes.
Good call, that's not in there otherwise.
And I don't think we need to detail the Washington State Association of Counties.
Yeah,
It always goes well when 5 counties try to tell 34 what to do.
I love it.
But I do agree with Amelia's suggestion to add back the climate mitigation goals.
Policy.
Climate mitigation policy. Is there anyone have any heartburn about adding climate mitigation policy to that item? No one has heartburn. We made it through. Here's your sheet back.
Now it's time to revisit what you guys wanted to revisit.
Time check.
Yeah, I
Please, it's my summer. I want my Wednesday. I mean, sure, yeah.
Yeah, we have spent a lot of time on this, but there's a lot more to go on the comp plan. If we can push through, I would strongly suggest.
Hold on, what's push through mean? Like, we're gonna agree to end in 10 minutes or 20 minutes?
I don't know.
Say an hour, I say no.
so look,
Maybe
according
a hard
to
stop at 9.
according to the agenda, at 8:21, we should be moving on to staff update, the Thurston 2045 update, and the calendar. So we should be approaching
already
adjournment, based on the agenda.
I think we only have one we marked as revisit, no, 2 we marked as revisit.
And that was early on before we had a process.
Yeah, and so that was number 1 and number 9.
E11.
Yeah, so B11
I have a note on one of the ones we just did.
and B2.8.
And just really quickly, I will note, so we've since learned that the what was it?
Yeah.
The HEC, the,
Energy performance?
no, sorry. I spoke before I knew what I was gonna say.
Okay.
The home energy performance ordinance.
Disclosure ordinance?
Yeah, it is written, essentially ready for adoption.
So the
Oh,
state,
okay.
the legislature passed it.
No, it would be the municipalities. So
The who?
Thurston County- The Thurston County municipalities, the cities and the counties.
So their objective is very close to already being achieved, is what we're saying.
There was an initial concern about the staff time to implement
Yeah.
a home energy.
And the revisit note was specifically for adding a due date.
Yeah,
But it sounds like we're already doing it.
We're near the finish line.
so we can add the due date and then call it a win.
It'll already be achieved by the time it's adopted.
Yeah.
Right.
So we
Mission
might not need a
accomplished.
change here.
I think we should take a win and make no change.
Okay,
Anyone have heartburn on that? Okay, cool.
all right, then the only other one to revisit
She's
in my
so
notes
excited.
is B2.8, number 9. This is TCMP set energy efficiency performance standards for commercial buildings with gross floor areas smaller than 50,000 square feet.
Is that covered by the same ordinance?
I don't believe so.
So I wrote
It's
B-
B2.9.
It's number 9, B 2.8.
Yeah, okay.
And if
Yeah.
I remember, this was one of those things where we have standards for larger buildings right now and we're already not doing it.
And
Can we hear?
we don't really have so many commercial buildings in unincorporated county that this might not be the most effective thing.
Set energy.
Was this the one that we were trying to make retroactive or just on new development?
50,000
I
square.
believe it was only on new development, if I remember correctly.
It was because we were talking about 50,000 square feet or less, and we were deciding how many of those do we have in the county right now, and the answer was none.
No, we definitely.
In
have a few.
the rural area.
We definitely have a few.
New developments? This
Yeah.
would only be new.
What is new?
Something that hasn't been built yet, but is in the process of. So I
Talk
guess
about
my
one of
big
the-
concern is like we were just down there at Black Lake Quarry and he's talking about maybe bringing in a
Trust factor.
truss factory. Well, it's gonna be open walled. How are you gonna enforce energy standards on something that's basically a tool shed? It's got a roof in the walls.
Well, they don't actually have heat inside, something like that. It's just a cover for keep the rain out and stuff.
It'd be a building at 50,000 square feet.
So it would be, I mean, what about powered and covered? Like, that at least covers that and like gets us. I know that one of the conversations that we had about that was like, we don't want to be including sheds or anything like that, but.
I would fall back on the state standards for that and not try to micromanage it or something that will probably rarely, if at all, happen.
So let's temperature check making no change here. Where are we at on that?
What, did we have any recommendations last time, or did Rebecca have any recommendations about that?
This is a state level implementation through the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. And then Rebecca's note was that there are commercial buildings in unincorporated county, but the urban heat island is not a concern in these areas. Not sure if cool roofs are cost effective. High impact action in this environment to warrant their own specific action. IPCL 27 covers energy efficiency investments in buildings, which would include roof upgrades.
Okay.
So Rebecca's weighing in basically state level, and we already have existing language that would probably affect this. So again, I will ask, temperature check, no change. That is majority.
Thank you all very much. I feel like this was really awesome to go through
Yeah.
one by one. I know it was a lot, but I feel like it really showed the community that we do care.
That is a very significant time investment on behalf of the planning commission to address concerns.
Sorry, my hand's been up for a little while.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I also just.
You also lounge like this and I don't know if your hand's up or.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's why I had to say something about it. And I apologize because everyone just put their stuff away. But when we were talking about 68, we talked about how like basically what they had there was like, you know, is the one about like this. You know, they were saying it's like the where feasible, it was that conversation. The only thing that they had in here, like their aggressive implementation thing, it said that provide preservation and restoration of prairie habitat for endangered and threatened prairie species while sequestering CO2. That was a specific thing they highlighted. And I guess my only ask is that when either, maybe this is a land use thing, maybe that's here, but if we could highlight that combination of prairie habitat for endangered threatened species and like carbon sequestration of prairie. This is the only time that carbon sequestration of prairie I think is mentioned. I think that's useful. Because we talk a lot about canopy in terms of carbon sequestration, and that might just be a useful additional tool there.
Okay, so you're just adding the language carbon sequestration, even though it says ensure forestry and prairie management plans include considerations for the impacts of climate change.
No, I'm just highlighting.
Okay.
I'm just saying like, when we're talking about policies there, I wanted to, we had mentioned a lot about the previous part. We hadn't talked about that part at all.
Right.
So I just wanted to re-emphasize that to staff.
That is part of CL 7B2, which is the set goals for future forest canopy and prairie acreage to increase resilience. And then it goes on.
Health and safety benefits.
And the
It just doesn't necessarily
Species,
say CO2, but yeah, it's that forest canopy and prairie acreage do impact.
maybe preserve biodiversity and increase resilience, and then the rest of it is covered by that.
So what is the suggested change?
Set goals for future forest canopy and prairie acreage to increase biodiversity and resilience, considering the competing and equitable distribution of their climate resilience.
That is a pretty minor change.
Mhm.
Do we have any objections to that minor change? We hear no objection.
I can
Okay, so we are
absolutely
only 15 minutes behind on the agenda. Moving on to item number 6, staff update. Derek.
So I think the only real update that I've got is, I mentioned last time that we were gonna have some reorg changes, in the CPED department, specifically on the Building Development Services side. Andrew Bond will be taking over the current planning and also doing the joint planning. So their team is gonna be doing a little bit of kind of the interface between the long range and the current, and then doing the current planning. So that will basically split what was the Building and Development Services into 2 teams.
So one team's gonna be processing permits, the other team's gonna be developing the joint plans?
also. So one will be we'll be processing or working on the land use side, not the building permit, not the permitting side. And then also that team is also gonna be responsible for like the joint planning.
Interesting.
So
Thank you.
No,
No.
I'm trying to figure this out in my head.
Does this seem like too much for one group?
it was way too much for one group and now it's two groups.
Now it's a lot for two groups.
It's a significant distribution,
Yeah,
so. I think we might be able to do something like an org chart.
Say that
Yeah.
again?
We might be able to provide an org chart.
that'd be great.
That would be great.
I think I've seen 3 different versions since I've been here, so
Okay.
I think it's finally settling down. So,
Okay.
I think we had two just last month.
Yeah.
That sounds like maybe a to-do for staff for next meeting, if you could provide an org chart. Does that sound fair?
He's still gonna be bringing building development code through this body though, right?
yes. It's all gonna move the same way, the teams are just being distributed differently.
Okay, moving on to item number 7, Maya with the Thurston 2045 update.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Maya Teeple, Senior Planner. Really short update tonight. Just a reminder that we have our open house for the comp plan on Saturday. We have some staff attending the Swede Day event, and we will have a booth there with posters on every chapter. So we're hoping to get a good turnout to that. My only other update for Thurston 2045 is we do have our board briefings scheduled. Our game plan for that is we will hold a series of 7 board briefings, and those will start in July and go through September. And so there'll be 30-minute briefings before the board on topics of the comp plan. And hopefully by late July or August, we'll have our Planning Commission recommendation, and then we'll slip that in as we're moving through those board briefings.
So those will be kind of moving a little bit in parallel, because we won't have, by the time, when we start, we won't have the planning commission recommendation. But there's a lot of background we can work with the board on before.
There's a lot of content we've already gone through too.
I just have a recommendation on agenda items. If we got somebody that's later at the end of the agenda that's got a short discussion topic, it might be best to change the agenda and move that to the front. Instead of keeping somebody online for 2
A
hours.
3-minute Maya update doesn't need to be at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
I'm here for the whole comp plan.
All right, but I'm not talking about just you, Maya. I'm talking about, I saw that in the BOCC meeting yesterday.
Good to survive that.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, we do,
Staff can
we do try.
recommend to the chair and the chair will approve.
Yeah,
We put the agendas together usually with that in mind, so.
all right. Moving on to 8, calendar with agenda items. So July 2nd, we've got work session 1 for the capital improvement project annual update, a public hearing and work session on permit review process annual update, and work session 37 on the Thurston 2045 work session and recommendation. Attendance wise, is anyone unable to attend on July 2nd?
We'll be attending remotely.
Okay,
Should be installing Andy Ryder's fireworks.
Oh, probably.
so that is sarcastic?
Very.
Okay. So it sounds like we will have quorum and then. Oh,
I said, I may not be here. I
Mhm.
don't know.
but that shouldn't threaten quorum, so we should be okay. And then July 16th, we have work session 1 on the open space application and request for public hearing. We will not have the public hearing for Black Lake Quarry since we did not reach agreement and there won't be enough notice time for that. So that won't be there. And then another work session for the comp plan. Anyone planning to be unavailable or not able to attend on the 16th?
No, but I think that you need to move the Black Lake Quarry land use amendment and rezone discussion to have a public hearing to the July 2nd meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've already spoke today about moving that agenda item to the next agenda. 'Cause we need to get a decision on that. And then that would mean our first August meeting would likely be the public hearing.
Yeah.
Right, but it sounds like no one has an attendance issue for the 16th. All right. 9, good of the order. One real quick thing, I noticed that we didn't have meeting notes and meeting note approval was not on this agenda. Is that something we're planning for next meeting? It just didn't have the staff capacity, I'm guessing. Okay, just want to make sure, because I didn't attend that meeting and I was hoping to catch up on it and could not. Any other good of the order?
Sorry. Anybody else been to a Swede Day?
Swede Day?
Swede Days.
In Rochester.
I didn't know, I grew up in a Swedish Lutheran church, so I'm quite fond of the Swedes.
There's gonna be a 2045 booth there. They were just telling us about.
I'll be there. I think we have at least one education and outreach staff member.
Claire was gonna.
Claire's gonna try to go. if She's healthy.
Lincolnberry jam.
Ice cream.
Are you gonna be there?
Yeah.
Are you gonna be there, Eric?
We'll probably run down for a bit, yeah.
Commissioner Pessner, are you gonna be there?
No, sir.
Okay, I was just wondering how many people are gonna be there.
Oh, yeah. you
Make
don't-
sure to stagger your times for your
Just don't-
Lincolnberry pancake.
No one congregate, so that we do not
Yeah,
violate
avoid eye
OPMA.
contact.
Heard you.
No,
Nothing
uh,
else for the good of the order then? Then adjourned at 8:36.
Good for the order.
Hey, we only went 6 minutes over agenda.